The Health Justice Initiative has welcomed the decision by J&J not to enforce patents it owns and controls for Bedaquiline, which is the treatment of multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis in 134 low and middle-income countries. Fatima Hassan is founder and head of the Health Justice Initiative. Fatima, let's firstly talk about the patent of this drug and how important it is to the treatment of tuberculosis.
Thanks, Kathy, for having us on the show. So I think a really significant decision by Johnson & Johnson, and I think it needs to be welcomed because you'll recall that activists around the world were challenging the seeking of the secondary patent by Johnson & Johnson, and in some countries that challenge was actually successful. And that just happened a few months ago in India. And in South Africa, the Competition Commission just a few weeks ago announced an investigation into Johnson & Johnson's evergreening or patenting strategy and practice on this particular drug. So the decision not to enforce the secondary patent in 134 low and middle income countries, as you've indicated, including South Africa, is significant because what it now means is that generic entries and lower priced generic versions of this particular drug can now actually enter not just South Africa, but all of these countries as well. So really, really important decision. And we obviously hope the Competition Commission's investigation will still continue.
The medication can be life-saving, particularly for those patients who are recovering from multiple drug-resistant tuberculosis. But when we look at the issue of cost as a barrier to access this medication, how high would you say that is for a country like South Africa?
So South Africa was in this very peculiar position where, because of the secondary patent that Johnson & Johnson had been granted by the South African authorities, we had no choice but to buy this particular TB drug from Johnson & Johnson on a tender because of our tender law. So we were precluded from purchasing this particular drug from what's called the Global Drug Facility, which Johnson & Johnson a few weeks ago had agreed to, enabling them to use a price reduction. But activists and, groups that have been working on this issue have said for a number of years now that the price, even with the price reduction, was still too high. So what it means is that the generic entries will be able to lower the cost of the different versions of generic entries, but also put pressure on Johnson & Johnson to lower its own price for this particular drug. In the case of South Africa, now that we have this announcement about the non-enforcement of the secondary patent, we hope that multiple generic entries will now come to market. They need to register their particular drug. And once that is, given regulatory approval, the South African government would be able to enter into a more competitive tender process and save hundreds and hundreds of thousands of rands in the process.
It doesn't change the profile of the medication at all, right?
No, because obviously a generic version of the drug would have to be safe, it would have to be effective, it would have to be what we call bioequivalent, it would have to receive regulatory approval. So there's absolutely no way you could get a more inferior version of the particular drug, and I think that's an important, element to emphasize.
All right, we'll leave it there for this morning, for this evening rather. Fatima Hassan, thank you so much for your time.